guys. Good morning. So today we will be addressing the subject of surviving tough economic times. I must admit that I'm quite overwhelmed by the numbers here today. I didn't expect so many of you, and I'm still weighing up whether the attraction was the topic of the presentation or the string hoppers. So I'll take it as a little bit of both. Now, one change which I haven't really broached with Stephen told me that I had half an hour for a presentation, and then we would have 10 or 15 minutes for questions thereafter. But I think it would be a better use of time if I could use the whole 45 minutes for the presentation, and you can ask me any questions you have as we go along. So you can stop me at points of relevance and we can discuss issues at those points in time. They will be more relevant at that point in time than having to come back all over again once the presentation is over. So if that's okay with you, let's proceed on that basis. When I first heard from Stephen, he asked me to do a talk about budgeting. And I thought, what a boring subject. It's a subject that only an accountant could love. But then as we started off and the economy started to deteriorate, the Reserve Bank kept lifting interest rates, and economic times started to get harder and tougher for the individual householder. Suddenly the boring topic started to look inspired. In the meantime also, the rather narrow topic of budgeting had morphed in my head to the broader topic of surviving tough economic times. And as I thought more about related items that I wanted to share with you. Now, being a man myself, I'm particularly pleased to be speaking and making this presentation to a men's group. Not that I have anything against the fairer sex, but I know that as men, we rarely share our issues and our hardships. Especially those men of my generation, which is long before we heard about this business of sensitive new age guys. Those of our generation in particular, and many in general, were taught to be tough and self-reliant. Bear our hardship silently and shield and protect our families. We were meant to be the breadwinners for our families, a badge we wore with pride. We brushed off aches and pains as originating from something trivial, rarely sought medical attention, and functioned for all purposes like Superman. So when I was given the opportunity to assist fellow men, I was only too happy to do whatever I could in the area that I'd spent most of my life in, which is finance. Now, one cannot talk about budgeting in isolation without discussing all the other facets of an individual's financial situation, which is why I have taken the broader approach. I hope you enjoy the presentation as much as I have in putting it together for you, and I sincerely hope that you will find something to take away from it today, something that you will find useful in your personal life and circumstances. Now, before I begin, Stephen said to me that I needed to say something about my faith journey prior to getting into the morning's presentation. It took me a while, not being hip to these modern Christian terms, to figure out what a faith journey was. No, only kidding. By way of doing that, let me first share with you something else. Jonathan Swift was born and died in Dublin, Ireland. He was an author, a poet, a satirist, a cleric. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah, so Jonathan Swift was an Irish author. and a satirist, and he died in Dublin a long time ago, and in 1726 he wrote Gulliver's Travels. Now, just about everyone is familiar with Gulliver's Travels and Gulliver going to Lilliput, where he met the Lilliputians, who were small people, 6 inches tall. But Gulliver made 4 journeys actually. So Gulliver went initially to Lilliput, the next time he went to Brobdingnag. On the 3rd journey he went to a floating island of Laputa, and in the last journey he went to an island of horses, all chronicled by Jonathan Swift. Now you're wondering what Jonathan Swift and Gulliver has to do with anything we are talking about today. The reason I bring up Gulliver's Travels is because on his 2nd journey, Gulliver visited Brobdingnag, which was inhabited by giants. Now I know exactly how Gulliver felt when he landed in Brobdingnag and saw its inhabitants. Because when I look around this morning, I see giants here. Individuals who have devoted their lives to Christian works and service, and I feel humbled. I will not mention any individuals by name for fear I might embarrass them, but in comparison I am but a minnow. My faith journey in comparison is ordinary and I'm afraid pretty boring. I was born to Catholic parents, baptized into the Catholic faith, received the sacraments of baptism, penance, the Holy Eucharist, confirmation, and holy matrimony. Attended a Catholic Christian Brothers School in the shadows of St. Lucia's Cathedral. Had to attend church service every Sunday and get my Mass card signed by the officiating priest to present at school the next day on Monday, just to show that I had been to Mass. And I married a Catholic girl who came from a Catholic family and attended a Catholic girls' school. However, when we migrated to Australia, we joined a Pentecostal church because the pastor and his family had been a great influence in the lives of my wife's family. And it was a church attended by my wife's sister and my brother-in-law Alan. After a while at the church, I was given the job of making the announcements every Sunday, but was soon sacked from that position because I wasn't serious enough. One famous line that I remember I used when inviting the congregation to a special Christmas service was, "Oh, come all ye faithful." Went over big with the congregation, but not with the pastor. Over time, because of my financial expertise, I became the treasurer of the church, a position that I held for several years, until I went to the Northern Territory, keeping the books, preparing financial statements for AGMs, preparing building fund statements for contributors, counting up tithes and after service, and depositing the cash every Monday in the church bank account. At that time, Peter Fryer would give me a ride on Monday mornings, and on his way to work at Mentone Station, so that I could lug the heavy coins into the city and deposit it at the bank. And those were the days we had to sort the coins out in those little plastic bags. Yeah, thank you very much, Peter, for all your assistance in those days. That period came to an end when I decided to take a break and travel to the Northern Territory to take up the position of an accountant on an Aboriginal settlement. That was quite an adventure for my wife and kids. However, although the council wanted me to extend my contract at the end of my stay, and I had several other job offers in Darwin, my wife and kids wanted to return to Melbourne. When we did return, we returned back to the Catholic faith, the seed of Catholicism being embedded too deep in my soul. What appealed to me and what appeals to me in Catholicism is its tradition, which sort of aligns with my personality. I am a conservative person, I value stability, and I take very few risks. I love belting out the old hymns that I used to sing as a kid, which are still around and sung today. And I remember all the words. The rosary is said in still the same way. Very little has changed, although the Mass now is in English rather than in Latin. Although I am old enough to remember when the Mass was in Latin and going to Mass, a Latin Mass. For me, this stability aligns with my vision of God. That God always was, always is, and always will be. That sort of unchanging property. An unchanging rock that you can build your life on. Anyway, that's my journey, a bit of a long one. For me, faith is a personal thing, and each one's journey is unique. And I'm sure that there are some pretty inspiring stories in this room if we went around. Now, well, that's my faith journey. Let's move on to the next slide.
Just click.
Yeah, having a few problems here.
Click.
With, no, that's it. Yeah, all right. Yeah. So, look, at the present time, in current economic circumstances, you don't have to look far to feel depressed. You turn on the news in the evening and it's all doom and gloom. You get people tell us that tax refunds will be smaller this year due to the end of the pandemic tax breaks. 1 in 6 households will be spending more than they earn by the end of the year. Evidence says that consumers are dipping into their savings or their offset accounts to make ends meet. A mortgage cliff is looming, and that's when fixed rate mortgages come to an end and people have to move into variable rate mortgages. They talk about people overnight going from 1.8% to 5.4% loans. We've had 12 mortgage interest rate hikes in the last 14 months. Economists think that there is at least a couple of interest rate more hikes to go. CPI has gone up to over 7%, while grocery prices have increased by almost 10%, and calls to the National Debt Helpline are up almost 30%. So times aren't the best, and which is why Stephen invited me to talk to you guys about this. And we know there's a lot more doom and gloom out there. Builders, commercial builders have gone bust and left people taking their deposits and with incomplete houses, and people having to then get compensated by the government and not totally compensated for all the interest they have, for all the deposits that they made, because the builders have not taken out the insurance that they were meant to have taken out. So I've just noted a few points here. My wife and I religiously watch the news every evening, just to make sure that we stay abreast of what's happening around the country and around the state. And the other thing is that utility prices are meant to jump. I just got an email from my electricity provider telling me that my electricity will cost me $400 more next year. I didn't tell them that I'm already on my way out because I found a new provider who is going to provide me with cheap electricity that I'm getting now, with a locked-in contract to the 31st of May 2024, so I won't have to worry about it for the next 11 months. So I'll share that with you guys in a little while. So, right, let's
Just kidding.
next. All right. This one? Or this? Sorry guys, okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's good. Getting used to the technology. So interest rates, fortunately, so I did this graph last month for you guys, just to show you and add to your depression. The interest rate hike over the last 14 months. So we didn't have the interest rate hike in April because the CPI numbers were better than expected, and we didn't have one in January because the Reserve Bank doesn't meet in January. But unfortunately, I got a reprieve from Philip Lowe, the governor of the Reserve Bank, because he didn't raise up rates in July. So which meant I didn't have to go back and redo my drafts. I could reuse the one that I just did. So
You got the sack
Yeah.
anyway.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Philip Lowe. Right, so the other thing I just wanted to mention in passing was about the cost of living, because the cost of living is bandied around as a number by broadcasters and commentators, but it really isn't a number. It's a market basket of goods, so that the CPI that impacts on each and every one of you will be quite different from the CPI that's bandied around, because you would buy a different mix of goods and services, and you would buy more of one and less of the other, so that the CPI that would impact on you if you bought more groceries or fuel or whatever would be different for every one of you. So I just thought I'd leave that with you, because it's not just one number. So if they tell you that the CPI is 5.6% last month, that's not what you expect to pay, because grocery prices could be up 10%, because it's only one of the commodities that's in that market basket of goods. And that figure is an average of the 8 capital cities in Australia. Now, all right, let's get into the presentation. So I thought I'd stick a rudderless boat here at this point in time, because if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a financial plan like a rudderless boat, you lack direction. You have no way of directing yourself in terms of your financial well-being and working out a path along which to go. You're at the mercy of the winds, and you are basically reactive rather than proactive, because you're waiting for something to happen. You don't know when it's going to happen, you don't know when a bill is going to come along and hit you, because you haven't planned for it. So the idea here is to make sure that you have foresight, and you know when these bills are coming, because bills can be lumpy in nature. For instance, you might have a car registration, which is a 12-month thing, or you might have your car insurance. Both of them may come in the same month. So you want to make sure that you are planned for that, and you have enough resources to be able to meet that. Now, very quickly, there are 3 facets of your financial life that you need to keep abreast of and make sure that you are optimizing each of them. We have your budget, which is your day-to-day ongoing current, in your current circumstances. That's the present. Your taxes are your medium term, so you do that annually, and that's your medium term, and then your superannuation is your long term. But there are things that you can be doing in your day-to-day life, which will then help optimize your superannuation when you get there, which is there for your retirement, and then it will help you minimize your taxes. So we'll talk about a couple of those that you can avail yourself of as we go along through the presentation. Now, all right, so why budget? So I've got here, have you ever said to yourself, where does all of my money go? I mean, if you don't have a budget, you have no idea of knowing exactly what you're spending your cash on. But if you have a budget, you can work out what you're spending your cash on, and you can plan better for the future. When will I be able to pay off my loans? Again, budgeting will help you with that. How am I going to be able to afford whatever you're planning on, you're saving for? budgeting will help you with that, because you can see whether your expenditure is going to be greater or less than your income, and whether you can achieve what you're setting out to achieve. Thinking about money makes me nervous. Budgeting will help you with your financial anxiety. I'm not a math person, I can't figure out how to budget. Budgeting only requires simple addition and subtraction. I'll show you a spreadsheet in a minute. I'm afraid to know how much I spend on. Budgeting gives you permission to only spend up to a certain amount. And my spending is out of control. Budgeting helps promote good spending habits. Now, so there are three possible outcomes when you're looking at your budget for the next year. Your income will probably could exceed your expenditure, in which case you'll be in a surplus situation and you don't have to necessarily worry, but you should still take a look at your expenditure and your income and see whether you can maximize your income or minimize your expenditure. If your income is equal to your expenditure, you're breaking even and you're living close to the edge. So you'd want to see whether you can create yourself a bit of a buffer, so that in case you hit emergency, you need to get some tires for your car, or you have a major breakdown, someone gets sick in the family and you need resources, you're going to find it tough to manage if you're just breaking even. And certainly if your income is less than your expenditure, then you're in a deficit situation. And not only do you need to work on minimizing your expenditure and maximizing your income, but you also need to be optimizing your financing strategy to make sure that you can manage how best to manage that difference and how you're going to finance that. So, in terms of budgeting, what I am recommending is that you determine your income. That's the easy part. Calculate your monthly expenses and then set realistic goals for yourself. So my plan of action for you is how much you get out of this. It will depend on how much you put in. I mean, that's always the case. So if you go back home and are willing to put in a bit of time, you can set out a plan of action and you take control of your financial lives. And that's important, because otherwise you're flying blind, and that's a dangerous situation to be in. Now, what I would recommend is you go back. My recommended approach would be to go back to 12 months of credit card and bank statements and list your income and expenditure in a spreadsheet with dates when the expenditure occurred. So you look at the last 12 months and use that as a template for your future 12 months. You can start tinkering with it as you go along and as circumstances change, but use that as a formula on which you will base your budget. The second thing is that way you will get the frequency of payments and the timing of lumpy payments, such as insurance policies that you pay annually. You could also precisely track your income if fortnightly and take into account any enterprise and bargaining increases that you're getting, or if you have money and you earn interest on that, when that interest comes in, if you have shares, when those dividends, the interim and the final dividends come in, you can put all those into your budget. And then you start, because I wrote this up as if you were going to start on the 30th of June is your given that you have a bank balance and you know how much cash you have in your account, and you start at that point in time, and then as you go through July, you will have a budget, which is your plan, and you will have your actuals, what you are expending as you go along, and the income that's coming in. And at the end of the month, on the 31st of July, you compare your actual budget to your budgeted number to your actuals. And if your actuals are greater than your budget in terms of your bank balance, that means that you have overestimated your expenditure or underestimated your income. And so you can adjust that. And then once having adjusted that, you take that month and stick it at the end of the next 12 months so that you will have a rolling 12-month budget. Now this will take a little time to prepare, but it's absolutely worthwhile, because then you will know whether you are ever going to be in a deficit situation somewhere down the track in the next 12 months. And if you are, it gives you time to plan for that. And it gives you time to make arrangements to find how you are going to get those funds. Because you want to avoid putting these short-term cash requirements on things like your credit card, because the interest rates are prohibitive. You pay something like 21%, and you can pretty soon get into a debt spiral, because as that interest rate keeps compounding, you get deeper and deeper in the mire, and you don't want to get stuck. So you can organize maybe personal loans if you know that you're going to be requiring cash at a certain point in time, because you will see over the 12 months that your balance is going to slip into being negative. And either you adjust your spending before that to bring it back into positive, or you make other arrangements to, in the best possible way, to optimize that. So it will take a bit of effort, but here is a snapshot of a budget that I put together for just a month. Now I've said, okay, two people are working here, your wife and yourself, and I've just made these numbers up. So my wife's pay is 1,250. She gets paid every fortnight, so she gets paid on the 4th, and then she'll get paid again on the 18th of July. There's about $250 to cover groceries and food. You can put in your tithes from on the 9th of July. I thought I better put that in because I figured a pastor was going to be in the room. And the wife's expenditure, if she takes, every time she gets a pay, she takes expenditures so that she pays for her coffees and her lunches and her petrol for her car and parking and all sorts of things. Yeah.
What about a hairdo? That's Pastor Cedric wants to know whether you put that in.
He has less hair now, fortunately. Right, so, and then you get your pay. I've stuck in there interim dividends. If we get any dividends, you can put that on. Your electricity bill, topping up your MyKey card, your union fees, petrol, medication. As you get older, medication becomes a bigger thing. You keep buying it more often and more of it. There is RSAB membership. We've got 2 cars, so I put down 2 memberships. Yeah, and that comes up in July. Car maintenance. Car gets maintained every 6 months. And food. And then the next fortnight we have Foxtel subscription comes up, $94. I pay for Storage King because they've downsized now, but unfortunately half the stuff has gone into Storage King because we haven't really truly downsized. It's a fake downsize, and a lot of the furniture is still sticking around. Then there's food and groceries, my daughter's birthday coming up, then suddenly my driver's license expired. So I had to renew that for another 10 years. So I put that in there as well. You pay your mobile phone charges and your internet charges once a month, and you get all this stuff from your credit card and your bank statement. So I went to last year's bank statement and looked at what I had paid in last July, and I stuck them back in here for this July. Now, once you have done this for the full year, you are in total control. And so at the end of the month, I can check whether my bank balance that I started with, say, was 2,500, whether it is 5,800 or not. And if not, then I can adjust this and stick this at the end for to be my July budget for July 2024. And that then gives me a outlook in terms of the obligation that I have to meet in 12 months' time. Now, having done that, what you should be doing is going back and trying to minimize your expenditure. Now, these are some of the things that I've done in the last probably 3 months. I got my Foxtel subscription fees reduced because I was paying $94 for Foxtel, and they sent me an email saying when your contract expires in April, we're going to charge you a further $10. So you're going to have to pay $104.50 per month for your Foxtel subscription. So I thought this was crap. So I went to the Foxtel website and had a look, and they were giving their premium package with everything, including Netflix, for $94. Now, I didn't want Netflix. And so I called them up and said, look, I'm offering to pay you $79, which is $94 less the $15 for Netflix, because I don't want Netflix. And that's all I'm going to pay you. And if you're not happy with that, I want you to cancel my Foxtel subscription. They put me on to various different teams that they had. And finally, they said, okay, well, we are sorry, Mr. Paiva, we're going to have to cancel your subscription. Now, my wife got all upset. She was in my ear all weekend saying, oh, you're going to cancel our TV, we're not going to have anything to watch. I said, look, don't worry, they're going to come back. The marginal cost of putting on a consumer is zero, because they've already got you there and they just give you what they already have. They stand to gain from the marginal revenue that you pay them. So this was Friday, so I had to put up with my wife's grumbling all weekend. On Monday I was at work and having lunch. My mobile phone rings and it's Foxtel. And they said, oh, Mr. Paiva, we're very sorry, you've been a good customer of ours, and we'd like to have you come back and stay with Foxtel, and you can pay us $56 a month. And I offered to pay them $79, and they offered me.
Did you give your wife the balance?
Sorry? Did
you give your wife the difference?
I don't need to give anything, she just takes. So I ended up saving over $450 with Foxtel. So take a look at what you've got. I mean, I saved on my insurance with AAMI. They sent me an insurance bill for $900. And I only drive my car once a fortnight. I walk to the station. I work from home 3 days a week, so I don't use the car. And I only use my car once a fortnight just to keep the battery turning over. So I called them up and I told them this. And they said, in that case, look, we'll drop your insurance premium from $900 to $400. And so that was a great reduction. The same thing happened with CBA. They wanted to put up they wanted to charge me an annual fee for my Visa card. I called them up and they waived that, because they had waived it all along for the last 30 years, because CBA had an affiliation with the Association of Certified Practicing Accountants. And just to get all the accountants to sign up to CBA accounts, they offered that they would waive your Visa card bill. And then Amex came along and they formed an association or affiliation with the Society of Certified Practicing Accountants. And so you got a free Amex card instead of the Commonwealth card. But Commonwealth Bank came back and said to all the accountants, look, if you guys stay with us, we will continue to waive your annual fees. And they've been waiving annual fees for the last 30 years. And suddenly they stuck this on. And I called them up and they waived it. And I expect that they'll keep waiving it, or if not, I'll be calling them again. And the interest rate, we had a small account with CBA and we were getting 2.2% on interest. I thought that was crap. I called the bank and said to them, look, interest rates are higher all over. Do we have to move this account from the CBA to somewhere else so we get a little bit more? Or do we stick with you and do you change the interest rate? They changed it at that time on the spot from 2.2% to 4.25%. They added 2.05% at the same time. So you can do this yourself. So there's no reason to accept your lot. Take a look at what you have, take a look at insurance policies, take a look at, because you get various comparison websites, take a look and make sure that you are paying the least you can. Because your money, your hard-earned money is tough to come by. And you want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth. Right, let's keep going here. Foxtel, I told you about. Now, if you have additional money to invest, one of the things to do is, it depends on whether you need it for sure. If you want it for a short term, you'd put it in a savings account because that way you have a very liquid source of money, so you can pull it out in case you need it. But if you don't need it for a fair while, you can put it in a fixed deposit account. If you have money that you can invest for a longer term, one place to look at would be the share market. And I have invested in shares before and it has been quite profitable. But one of the things you can look at is there's something called a margin loan. I don't know whether you guys are familiar with that, but let me just tell you what that concept is. If you have $5,000 to invest, the bank will loan you against that security. It will loan you, depending on the share that you want to buy, a leverage of say 80%. So say you want to buy Telstra shares, and Telstra shares are selling, you want to buy 5,000 Telstra shares at $5, that would be $25,000. The bank will lend you 80% of that, because Telstra is a share that is a reputable company. It's like the big four banks, so CBA, ANZ, NAB, and Westpac would be similar. So they would lend you say 80% of whatever the value of the shares are. So they would lend you $20,000 off that. You have your $5,000 security, and you with $5,000 worth of cash, you can end up buying $25,000 worth of Telstra shares. The only problem is that if the share price of Telstra drops, then they can issue a margin call and get you to deposit more money or sell the shares and recover the money. So you've got to be careful in terms of what you're doing. But if you had access to something like that, when, for instance, COVID hit and you had shares drop through the flow, you had companies like Flight Centre, when all the countries closed their borders, Flight Centre, Webjet, Qantas, they dropped to incredible levels. Qantas was $2 something a share. Flight Centre fell to less than $10 a share. Webjet was $2 something a share. And now they've recovered to, Webjet is $6 something, Flight Centre is almost $20, and Qantas is about $6 something. So if you had jumped in at that point in time, and if you had access to something like this, and you were able to buy big, you would have made a fair bit of money. Something else that's a good,
5
yeah,
minutes.
5 minutes more. All right. Something else that I'd like to leave you guys with is, the good thing about shares is there's when you get a cash dividend, you have something called an imputation credit. I don't know whether you know about this, but this is so much better than bank interest. If you have bank interest and you pay 32.5% on your taxes on the interest you get, that leaves you a residual of $67.50. But with the shares, what happens is that you get to gross it up to cover the taxation that the company pays. So you declare income of, they give you cash of $100, you declare income of $142, you pay tax on the 142 at 32.5%. But you get to claim the credit that the company has paid taxes on against the taxes that you pay. So basically you end up paying only about $3.56 of taxes, so that you end up with net income of $96.44, a benefit of about $28.94 on that dividend. So there is a positive in terms of shares. Now, I'm going to skip through here quickly. I was going to talk to you about superannuation implications. One of the things that everyone sort of recommends that you do, if as people, as old timers like us, we joined the company and we stayed there. But I think now the modern thing is that people move around between jobs. So everyone recommends that you end up with different jobs, and you end up with several different super funds. So one of the things that's recommended by all analysts is to make sure that you merge them, so you don't pay 150 different administration fees and charges all over the place. But in doing that, you need to weigh up which super fund you're going to merge things into and make sure that that's the best for you and for your circumstances. You need to take a look at what the investment options are with your super fund and make sure that that aligns with with your preferences and your risk profile, and you can make after-tax contributions to super. Now, one of the things that I have utilized myself is to salary sacrifice into super, because that is a tremendous advantage. And if I don't tell you anything else, let me tell you about that. It's up to a maximum of $27,500, which you can sacrifice into your superannuation from your income before tax. Now, that $27,500 also includes the employer contribution that the employer contributes to super. Yes, sir.
Question. Superannuation, I never thought it was any good anyhow, but you might be convincing me. I have calculated through my life 60 years of petrol prices and 45 years of house price, personally, and I have discovered that money loses half its value every 10 years. That means my house in another 40 years will be an $8 million house. It's not quite $1 million yet. That speaks the same for your superannuation, because they promise you a lot of money way up there. By the time you get there, it's not worth anything. How do you factor that kind of economy into superannuation?
Yeah. I mean, that's the same as anything in terms of real purchasing power. With wage increases now, for instance, the government's wages policy is 3.5% against inflation rate of 7%. So you're always losing money. It's the old question of real purchasing power.
So it's the purpose of the bank, the Reserve Bank, setting this concept of 3% inflation is really nice. More is not so good. Less is not so good either. Is that in endeavour to maintain this general sense of economy losing half its money every 10 years?
Well, I guess they try, but you know, the government is and the economy is sort of, we are not isolated and we are subject to all these pressures from the rest of the world. For instance, they were saying that the war in Ukraine, because of that, it impacted on gas prices, which is something that's good now impacting on our power bills.
Yeah, I mean, they say that, and that's why we have a war there, because they can do that. And you notice that those who are in that kind of business, they're making, what do they call them, super profits or something?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I just, that's my point of view,
Yeah,
that superannuation, forget it.
But it's, yeah, I guess my thing is something is better than nothing, I guess. So these are the employer contributions. This year it's going to be 11%. The employer will be contributing on your behalf. But what I want to leave you with is this example of salary sacrificing. It's something that I have utilized. So say Sam has a income of $100,000. He pays tax of $22,967 at 32.5%, and he takes home $77,000. He has $200,000 in his super. Sam's so he has $200,000 in his super. Now, in terms of the total contribution that he can make into super, because he's making $100,000, the employer contribution was 10.5%. Sam will contribute, the employer will contribute $10,500, which leaves Sam $17,000 he is able to contribute into his superannuation before tax. So say Sam takes that route and that option, he still makes $100,000. He contributes $17,000 into his superannuation. Because he contributes $17,000 into his superannuation, his taxes go down because he's only got $83,000 now that he's going to have to pay tax on, rather than the $100,000. So what happens with his super? He converts his super into a transition to retirement pension, and he withdraws $11,475 from his super, which supplements his income. So he takes him back to where he was, and he has the same take-home wage. Now, what happens here is the 17 that he contributes into super gets split up into a contributions tax of 15% and a net contribution into super of $14,450. When the $14,450 goes into super, what happens is that you have your $200,000 that you started with, $11,475 that came out to supplement your income, and $14,450 going back in. You end up with a net almost $3,000 more in super than you had previously. And analysts used to refer to this as the magic pudding, because you take something out, but you end up with more there. And then that sort of that compounds over the next year. There'll be earnings through the share market, through the superannuation funds, investing your funds, and you end up with more, and then next year you can do the same thing. So it's really a worthwhile concept to consider. If you're wondering whether you can convert this, it'll depend on your preservation age, and that's your preservation age. So if you're born before the 1st of July 1960, 55 years was the preservation age, and those are the preservation ages down the line. Now, I think I've run out of time. Stephen.
Any concluding comments?
Yeah.
Any concluding comments?
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, just one thing, in a couple of, not this financial year, 23-24 or 24-25, we're going to get a tax break. So if you're making anywhere between $45,000 and $180,000, you go to a marginal tax rate of 30 cents, where it was 32.5 and 37 previously. Just so you know that's coming up. But in terms of it's an interesting area, and so there's a lot to talk about, as you can see. But what I want to leave you with is, just want to wish you good luck on your each of your individual financial journeys, because each of your circumstances is going to be different, and I wish you the best of luck. Now, I'm not a financial planner, so I am not qualified to give you advice, but I can open your eyes to the alternatives that are out there, and then you should seek financial advice from someone who is licensed to do that. But the thing is to try and find someone who has your interest at heart rather than his own, because too often you find that these financial advisors might be chasing the commissions that they get and advising you in those terms rather than what is the best for you. So if you can find someone that's good, that has your interest at heart, then make sure that you embrace him and introduce him to the rest of your friends here as well.
A question for you, Mrs.
Yeah.
When would be a good time to get a financial advisor? Should it be at the beginning, middle, or at the end of your career? Because from a
Yeah.
young person's perspective, they may not see a value in a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're getting close to retirement, it might be too late. So when do you reckon perhaps?
I think it's never too early to seek financial advice, because because you need to map out have a roadmap for your life, and a financial roadmap, because that way you know whether you're going along. You don't want to be going down the wrong path early on and then suddenly have to make a diversion and come back to the path again. But if you have set yourself a pathway that you know is the way to go, that would be a prudent way to proceed, because even if you deviate, at least you know you won't deviate too far.
So, when you got a minute ago, I just want to ask you a question on that. Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that the Reserve Bank has the right to alter interest rates as they choose. First of all, you can explain what bearing does the Reserve Bank have on your bank, the ANZ, the Commonwealth, or whatever. And secondly, now that we're onto the subject of superannuation, when the Reserve Bank alters interest rates on your loan, does that have any direct or indirect effect on the interest that you paid from superannuation? For example, if you've got superannuation for $1,000 in the bank, and you're assuming that your interest rate on your mortgage is say 5%, by the end of the year you pay say $1,050 interest. But if you get that $1,000, which is your superannuation, would the interest rate which you're paying for your loan, does that have any direct reciprocal on the interest rate that you've gained from superannuation? Do you understand the question?
No.
Or is it separate?
Could we tackle your question after?
All right.
Yeah.
Well then,
Yeah.
last question before we close off.
Yeah.
We've got
No, I just want to say, if you guys bump into me at some stage, somewhere in Beverly Garden doing shopping or buying Sri Lankan takeaway in Clayton or something, and just come around and say hello, and if you've done something that stemmed from what we spoke about this morning, just let me know, because nothing will please me more than if one of you or someone of you have gained something from this time that we spent together this morning. And thank you very much for having me.
on that note, put your hands
Yeah.
Now, we're just going to draw a lucky door prize.